Really close.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 6th, 2018 caucus meeting for the City of Brook Park. Michelle, please call the roll.
Scott?
Here.
Bergio?
Here.
Orcutt?
Here.
Stem?
Here.
Mancini?
Here.
Poindexter?
Here.
Salvatore?
Here.
If everyone would, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to item number 3 for discussion. Number 1, Mayor Gamella's appointment to Safety Director Brian Blaney.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I respectfully ask this be pulled. I'll be coming forward with a new plan on this. So I'd like to move to item 2.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Salvatore.
I'd like to remove item number 1 from the agenda.
Support.
Motion on the floor to remove item number 1 from the agenda, properly supported. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Michelle, please call the roll.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Bergio?
Yes.
Orcutt?
Yes.
Stem?
Yes.
Mancini?
Yes.
Poindexter?
Yes.
Motion to remove item number 1 from the agenda has been approved. Item number 2, Mayor Gamella's appointment to Service Director Randall Garner, per Council President Vecchio.
Mr. Chairman?
Mayor? Mr. Salvatore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had a chance to review the resume. I think it's a great fit. I know the gentleman. I think he'll do an outstanding job. I really do like the idea of promoting from within and allowing everyone else to have a chance to speak. At the time, at the end of the discussion, I'd like to make a motion that we place on tonight's council agenda under verbal approval.
Support.
Motion on the floor to put on tonight's council meeting under verbal approval, properly supported. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Mancini?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll concur with my colleague, Mr. Salvatore. I think there was some very good choices coming out of the service department this time on this, and I also agree that Mr. Gardner is a very good choice, and thank you very much.
Seeing no one else under discussion, Michelle, please call the roll.
Salvatore?
Yes.
Bergio?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Orcutt?
Yes.
Stem?
Yes.
Mancini?
Yes.
Poindexter?
Yes.
Motion to move Mayor Gamella's appointment to the council meeting tonight under verbal approval has been approved. Mayor, did you want to speak on it at all or not?
No, I would just say thank you very much, Council. I appreciate it.
Great. Moving on, number 3. Council office policies and procedures per Council President Vecchio. Reason I have this on here, gentlemen, is obviously, as we know, we've had some things come up and arise here over the last few weeks that has to do with policies and procedures that have kind of been amiss within our department. And it's something that we need to collectively start looking into, thinking about, and maybe forming a group, including myself, to go over. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Mr. Salvatore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, could you be more specific? I mean, what is there something that we should know about that we can talk about now?
Well, yeah, we had some procedures with the former assistant council clerk being out on leave and paperwork that should have been filled out and processed through to the Human Resources Department that never took place. New council come in and there was no paper trail to really make us aware of it. And these are items that are could be very detrimental if not followed in the process and in the procedures. I mean, the law director has looked at some things and she has put a determination together. So there's at least some knowledge there. But a lot of the procedures we need to follow through for myself, the pro tem if I were not here, or any future council presidents for that matter.
Is there a policy and procedure manual in place right now?
Currently for council, there is not one. There is one for the city of Brook Park. Council had adopted one from 1991 and never updated going through any of the organizational meetings or the council rules. So my belief is that that rule should follow every forward-moving policy and procedure manual. So you figure from 1991 to 2010, we've got a large gap.
Well, the two individuals that work for the city council, they're also employees of the city. They should have been following the same manual that everyone else had. They shouldn't be isolated to something that is outdated. They should have been issued the updated policy. Which one are we operating off of now? What date?
Currently it's 2010.
Okay, so they're operating off of 2010, but you said that they were operating off of one from 1991.
Well, the council rules show 1991 being the last one, and that was just what was adopted, that council would follow rules, reading through the minutes. At that time, Councilwoman Spina had brought it up and came down through that they would follow rules, that the mayor at that point, which I believe was Mayor Coyne, would have started that policy and procedure manual.
What's
And that's kinda
the
where it dropped
most
off.
current one that we have on file now?
The most current one in hand is 2010, but there was also an update to 2015 that I don't know if that was ever brought forward.
Okay, well, I would suggest we start there then. Let's get that 2015 policy and procedure manual over into our office so that we can make sure that our employees are being treated in the same respect as everyone else that's an employee of the city of Brook Park.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Mr. Poindexter.
Thank you, Council President. In the last meeting, we voted to not fill the assistant clerk's position at this time till we figured out what happened with the paperwork. And then, since that time to now, there was a letter sent out saying we weren't retaining her. I think that's one of the policy and procedures that needs to be followed, that, council decides if we're going to retain or not retain somebody. I think the assumption was that we were voting on not filling her position until we found the letter from this office to the department, to the HR department. So maybe you can clarify that, and why we're talking about policies and procedures. Help me to understand why that letter was sent. Thank you.
Well, I believe that the correct motion was to not reappoint the clerk at this time, the assistant clerk, of which council voted unanimously 7-0 to not reappoint. So there was no gray area, if you will, in between that, stated as far as a paperwork trail or anything else. So it went to the no reappointment, which in turn, as not being reappointed, we'd received some email transmissions back and forth from the former clerk to the law department, myself, human resources, and all of you members of council. So obviously back and forth, the law director, the human resources director were heavily involved. Law director looked through a lot of stuff to try and see if a paper trail or anything else was there. There was nothing. And with the non-reappointment, as being the office administrator and being responsible for that employee, it's my duty to send out that letter to let her know that she was not being reappointed.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Mancini.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Council President. On something of that sort, in my short time here, if I'm not mistaken, personnel, legal, and the financial, shouldn't the three of them be discussed in an executive session before maybe a move like that's made? Or do I stand corrected?
I would refer that one to the law director to ask her for that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Based on your agenda, I was unsure what direction perhaps your discussions would go. I think if it goes anywhere beyond the fact that council had declined to reappoint her and that a letter was sent indicating that she was not reappointed, if it goes a little bit beyond that, then probably you are correct. If there are further questions, perhaps it is best to do it in executive session. But the fact that she was not reappointed and then a letter was sent, I think that's within the public parameter. It certainly is reflective of council's previous vote.
So you're saying that the letter was safe, but theoretically, we probably should have had executive session on a personnel matter like that?
Well, basically what I'm saying is a public discussion of council's vote and then a subsequent letter informing her of council's decision, which, you know, I imagine is only proper. I mean, you wouldn't want to take a vote and then leave her in the dark as to what council's decision would be. You would certainly want to inform her of that. But some of the other issues that surround perhaps questions concerning personnel policies and her individually are probably best left for an executive session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. Mr. Salvatore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was my understanding when we voted that the reappointment was not going to take place, not because we weren't interested in allowing her to return to work, but we were looking for the information to find out why she didn't have a job when she returned to work. And that's my understanding, and I really don't need to go into executive session to discuss it. I think that it should be discussed right out here in the open. I think the young lady should have an opportunity to know that the people that she worked for are concerned about her future and want to know what happened, how it happened, why she came back and didn't have paperwork, how she left on more than one occasion without any paperwork. I think these are the things that we need to discuss. And once we have those answers, then we can revisit the opportunity to see if she's coming back to work. And at that point, whatever council's actions are going to be taken, at that point, I agree with the law director, we should go into executive session to determine how we're going to move forward and to rectify this problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Orcutt?
Since our last meeting on January 23rd, when I asked about the paperwork, was there any paperwork found in HR?
To date, none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, need an action, gentlemen?
I'd like to make a motion that this was discussed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before I'll support that, but after I have one more question.
Go ahead, Mr. Salvatore.
Is there anything else that you want to bring up?
As far as in our office policies and procedures, you know, we've got to look at a host of things. I mean, obviously, we had some outside expenditures last year for minutes from meetings that had run awry. A lot of stuff plays into that. You know, it's part of our budgetary process out of this council that obviously we're responsible for. Over the course of the last 2 years, one of the bigger issues that I've seen is each year the budget increased and the expenditures of that year exceeded the appropriation for the year before. So just to give a synopsis, for 2016, there were, I believe, the total number I printed, 2016, the total appropriation for that year was $272,858.11. We spent in 2017 $279,663.68. which was a $19,000 increase, or 7% over the prior year. Over the last couple years, which would be from 15 through 17, we increased the budget and expenses by 5% to 2016, and like I said, 7% to 2017. Total changes through that time was 13%. What happened with that, as we look through, going back over it, is that we spent a total cost, and this included clerk, assistant clerk, an outside clerk that we spent almost $4,400 on, along with 2 stenographer firms. We spent 11% of the total 2017 council appropriation to pay to do minutes. It equaled out to $33,592 just to do minutes, and that is using the part-time clerk, the clerk that we use from the outside, along with the 2 stenographer firms. This didn't include the full-time clerk salary in that. We spent $6,934 to Tackle and Associates, $3,536 to Corsia, $18,687 on the part-time clerk, averaging 24 hours a week, and another outside clerical of $44.35. That equals out to the outside clerk, based upon the $10 an hour that the charter states, she worked 443 hours additionally, catching up the meeting minutes. You know, and having the averages of roughly 2.5 hours per meeting. So a caucus meeting of 2.5 hours and a council meeting of 2.5 hours, it's virtually impossible for a clerk and assistant clerk to catch that stuff up. And that's the inefficiencies that took place that this council is now tasked with straightening out. As we look through the times, I mean, literally, for 2017, 116 hours, 27 minutes were spent in meetings. There were 34 council meetings, 26 caucus meetings, for a total of 60 meetings. It averaged out to 2 hours, 37 minutes for a council meeting, 2 hours, 24 minutes for a caucus meeting. And there are some meetings in here that were 4 minutes, 5 minutes, which obviously brings the numbers way down. If you take those out, the numbers are much higher. 2016, 117 hours, 25 minutes, 49 seconds in meetings. There were 62 total meetings, 36 council, 26 caucus, and they averaged right around 2 hours each. So it's a wonder as to why we weren't able to get the things done within the office with the personnel that we have here. You know, it breaks down just spending on outside firms to do the minutes. The 2 outside firms went through and caught up 33 hours, 22 minutes worth of meetings. And it was 14 meetings total that were, I don't know how they decided that they wanted those 14 meetings to be the ones that they transcribed. But it worked out to $312 per hour that we paid the 2 outside firms to catch up our meeting minutes. And this to me is, I mean, it's a huge discrepancy and a huge problem within the administration of that office and where it was at. Something that obviously we can't have, and we need to ensure that it doesn't happen.
If I could make a suggestion, if it's okay with Councilman Orcutt, rather than making a motion that we discuss this, I would like to keep it in front of us and move it to the next caucus. And if you can bring some more information forward on some of these things, the council can make a determination as we keep discussing it, what we're going to do about it, some of these issues. I'd like to make a motion, we move it to the next caucus agenda.
Well, there's a motion on the floor by
I'll
Councilman Orchard
retract
first.
my motion, and I'll support Councilman Salvatore.
So a motion on the floor to move to the next council or caucus agenda, which would be the 13th of February, properly supported. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Poindexter.
Thank you, Council President. I'm just curious, what policy or procedure would you suggest that would solve the problem that you presented? It seems to me that it's because it was created by the meetings running long. I mean, the only policy or procedure that I can foresee that would eliminate that problem would be given time limits to the meetings, and I, for one, am not in favor of that at all. So maybe you can give us some suggestions, maybe for the next meeting, of other policies and procedures that could solve this problem. And thank you.
Thank you. And to respond to that, checks and balances needs to be put into place regarding ensuring where we're at on the minutes. I mean, obviously, that's the clerk's responsibility is to do the minutes and assistant clerk if they're there or whatever. It's pretty simple to find out what is going on with some simple communication, verbal communication, email, everything that we currently have. So that's one area to start taking a look at and thinking about. Mr. Stem.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Through the chair to the finance director. Do we have a variance report percentile that we have to make notations? Like if we get over 3 or 5% within a month to justify it and keep track quarterly so we know when to make adjustments to stay on budget?
Through the chair to Councilman Stem. No, we don't have a internal variance report that we utilize to determine when to bring an appropriation change ordinance to council. We do receive a variance report from our auditors, and when variances exceed a certain percentile, they come back to us for an explanation of why the variance is higher than what they would consider the norm. So we do have to respond to the auditors when asked about certain variances.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, motion on the floor is to move this to the 13th caucus agenda, properly supported. Michelle, please call the roll.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Orcutt,
Yes.
Perugio,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Poindexter,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
Stem.
Yes.
Motion to move.
Question,
Mr. Scott?
real quick. Are we going to have a updated copy of the policy and procedure, the city's 2015, so that we can have it in our boxes to look at?
Yeah, I will reach out to our Human Resources Commissioner and make sure that everybody has that.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so item number 3 will be on the February 13th caucus agenda. Item number 4, proposed changes to Council Rules 26, 27, and 28 per Council President Vecchio. So everybody has this in their packet. The first one is Rule 26, the no smoking rule, and this is just really to move these up and eliminate that rule because it is state mandated that there's no smoking in public buildings. So I think we can get rid of that because there's a Ohio revised code on that. I don't know what council's feelings are on that, but let's move down through these and then we can go back and discuss which ones, or do you guys want to discuss them individually? Mr. Mancini?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. On the Rule 26, I have no problem with that. I mean, that's all over. That's just, I guess, maybe just moving ahead, that's all. I have no problem with erasing that. A couple of the others, I might have a little more say-so, but thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Rule 27, which if we follow through, it would be Rule 26 going new. The changes to this are just really some verbiage changes, and really as I said before, the council administrator, or the council president shall be the administrator of the council office with the responsibility of directing the day-to-day operations of the office in accordance with policies established by the majority members of council. In addition, the council president shall follow the personnel policies and procedures adopted by council on November 26, 1991. All rules and regulations can be amendable or nullified by a majority of council. All expenditures in excess of $500 must be approved by council, and the administrator shall serve at the pleasure of council. So some of the changes to this are adding for the council administrator, council president, operations of the office and employees within. All policies and procedures shall be in accordance with the rules of council and policies established by the majority members of council, the charter of the city of Brook Park, and the state of Ohio. In addition, the council president shall follow and enforce the personnel policies and procedures of the most current city of Brook Park personnel policy manual. So that goes back to our previous discussion with the policies and procedures. We need to add that in there so that that just continues to roll forward. So whatever the most current city policies and personnel manual is what the council office should be following. All rules and regulations can be amendable or nullified by a majority of council. And the next change is upping the council president's expenditure limit to $750, which the last one was in 1998. So this is basically just asking for a 2% increase. And the reason being is we just had a couple weeks ago, we had to approve the Office 365 for our email, which was $519. So it had to come all the way through us, back through council in order for approval. You know, we've had since 1998, I believe, cost of living has went up 34%. You know, and this has kind of stayed the same. So those are the items that are there. Questions or discussion, anyone? Mr. Scott?
We're looking at trying to save some money here and there, you know, we're doing our prudence on the budget and stuff. I really don't know if I like increasing that $750 without coming to council. I think the $500 was fine, and if you need something over $500, you come to council, we put it on the caucus, we move it up to the next council agenda, we pass it on verbal. I mean, I don't foresee that to be a huge problem. I just the $750 just right now doesn't bode well. We're looking at trying to save money out there, and that's just one of the things. I just don't feel comfortable taking it to $750.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mancini?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I'm kind of mixed on that 750. I totally concur with my colleague, Mr. Scott, but, you know, again, too, you know, things have gone up so, but yeah, I guess we could, you know, we could always come to council, and on that, to increase monies, we could always come to council. On that thought, on this, council president shall follow and enforce the personal policies and procedures of most current Brook Park personnel. And then we say, and all the rules, regulations can be amendable and nullified by the majority of council. I mean, it's almost like, if I'm not mistaken, there could be a little bit of a contradiction there. I think anything, again, as we stated before, back with the policies, that, you know, this is council, and anything that's done should be through with council. You know, not that I don't trust you at all, Mr. Council President, I do, but I think given the council president that to enforce personal policies and procedures of most current city, you know, it's pretty strong wording. You know, probably the word that stands out to me, enforce. So, enforce should also, anything up here should probably include council a little bit too, I would think. But, you know, I'll have it with my colleagues and see what their thought process on this is. But, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. Mr. Salvatore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think until we we finalize the third item on the agenda. Otherwise, we're going to continue talking about some policies and procedures. I think we should hold off on changing any of these particular rules. I have been working for the last couple of years trying to clean up some of our rules, and I have been having some dialogue with a few of our members of council. So we are going to be bringing forward a couple rule changes at a time. But at this time, I think we should hold off on 26, 27, and 28 until we finish the dialogue of section number 3 from this agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Bergio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I was going to ask you about why do you feel the need for the increase, but you answered that question quite well. I know that we haven't had an increase since '91, so it's I can see your point on that, but I prefer to keep it the way it is, just for the sake of transparency, and if it really is needed, council will move on it, I believe, too. So I feel more comfortable keeping it that way, but I'm anxious to see what Councilman Salvatore has for his rules, the things he's been working on also. That's how I feel at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Poindexter.
Thank you, Council President. I too have issue with the amount being raised. If anything, in my opinion, I think we should lower the amount so that way council is fully engaged in any purchase that this office makes. I think $300 would probably be a little bit more of a reasonable number. You could always call a special meeting if necessary if it's an emergency situation or something like that. But I think council should have more say of what goes on in council business and not less. Also, I have issue with the council president shall be the administrator of the office of council, directing day-to-day operations of the office and the employees within. I find it, I'd want to be able to go to the clerk with whatever I needed the clerk to do for me. And, you know, I wouldn't want to go through the council president, whether it's you or anybody else. Not saying that, you know, there's any ill intent there, but we know how polarizing politics can be, and I wouldn't want my request to the clerk to be filtered out by anybody sitting in that chair. So I really have issue with that wording as well. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Poindexter. Anyone else? All right, move on to the last one, which is the email communications, just to go over with this, and this was pretty slight on that. So obviously, we already approved the email, and this just outlines that each council member shall be assigned a uniform City of Brook Park email address. Example is someone@cityofbrookpark.com to be used to conduct all City of Brook Park related business. Council emails may not be used for personal communications or personal business. As such, personal emails should not be used by members of council to conduct council business. It's pretty simple, pretty standard procedures right there for email. I don't see any more discussion. Gentlemen, need an action?
I'd like to make a motion, that items 26, 27, and 28 have been discussed.
Support.
Motion on the floor that number 4 has been discussed, properly supported. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Michelle, please call the roll.
Salvatore,
Yes?
Orcutt,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Poindexter,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
Stem,
Yes.
All right, so motion is 7-0 on that. To move forward, number 4 has been discussed. Number 5, live stream of caucus and council meetings. Brandon or Brandy Reynolds for the months of February through March 31st, 2018. $2,400 appropriated per Council President Vecchio. So, let's preface this one. The council live stream was really started in 2016. Brandon and Brandy Reynolds had done it for a long time. Started out, and they were doing it for free, and it became that somebody brought up that they should be paid for it. So at that time, my predecessor decided that council should not be responsible for it. Mayor Coyne, our previous mayor, took it in his own budget to compensate them for the job that they had done, running a live stream, which obviously is beneficial to the residents of the city. So in August of 2016, Brandon and Brandy Reynolds received their first pay at $100 per meeting. And from that point forward, the code 400 bucket of the mayor's office paid that until here we are today. It being a council action, an action of council, Mayor Gamella has decided that he wasn't going to pay for it, which is rightfully so. It should come back over to council. So the purchase order that was instituted for the temporary appropriations, temporary budget by Mayor Coyne has filtered forward. There's $2,400 currently appropriated to cover the 2 months. Within that amount is Boxcast, who is the provider. Boxcast charges us $235 per month. So for this 2-month period, there are scheduled 6 meetings for each month, so a total of 12 meetings. That would be $1,200 to Brandy and Brandon for operating the live stream, and there would be $470 payable to Boxcast. So we have roughly $1,700 outstanding that will be budgeted and expensed to pay for those 2 months. There will be $700 additionally sitting in case there were a special meeting or anything else that was called by council or anyone else. That money would be able to be used from that. Whatever money is left over then goes back into the general fund. That's what we're looking at on this. Mr. Salvatore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to the mayor. Mayor, is there a reason why you don't want this in your budget? Why you want to remove it from your budget?
Rick, it's really a council function. It's a council meeting. It's here in the council chambers, which is council, where we're still paying for it out of the city. So it's just, from a different bucket, that's all.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure because I agree, council should assume the responsibility, put it in our budget. It is our meeting. I agree with you there. I just didn't want to end up in a situation where for some reason that we wanted to discontinue it because I think people like this and I think we should keep it. My second question, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the answer. My second question is there a contract anywhere? And I guess I'd direct that question to either the law department or the finance department. Are we under contract?
Madam Laudarkner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilman Salvatore, to my knowledge, I don't believe that there is. I don't recall reviewing one. I would defer to finance, but I don't believe that there is one.
Through the chair to Councilman Salvatore. My understanding there's an agreement between Brandon Reynolds and the administration. I'll go back and look through the records and just to see if we do have one, and two, to see if there was a time frame that the agreement was for. But let me check tomorrow and see if there's an agreement still in force.
Okay, if I may continue, Mr. Chairman. I would be very interested in knowing if we do have one and how it reads. And if we don't, or even if we do, and now the council is going to assume the responsibility, I would like a new contract drafted with council. And obviously the mayor would sign off on it, but I think we should have a say-so on the amount, how it's going to be run, and moving forward, how it's going to adapt into the new location if and when that takes place. And I'm sure it will, but the sooner the better. If you can't find a contract, then I'd really like to sit down with you and start working on drafting one. That one that, for moving forward, even if we do it on an interim basis and do it quarterly, I'd appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like you to be involved and help us put this together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, and as you said, there is no contract. There's a proposal for payment from the Reynolds, and that was sent over, and it's just a proposal on that. There is no, I don't have a signed contract. There's not one that I'm aware of. So that is something that would have to be worked on.
Okay, well, I've never seen the proposal, but I definitely would like a contract.
Mr. Mancini.
Thank you again for recognizing me, Mr. Council President. I do agree it's a great service. They do a great job. A lot of people watch it. Some people watch it a little more than once, sometimes more than twice. How about we do this, Mayor? We split the cost here. You take 12, we'll take 12. How's that sound?
Council will work with you on it.
I had to say it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Scott?
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Single. Basically, just to get this clarified, this $2,400 has already been appropriated from our 3-month appropriations that we passed in December.
Through the chair to Councilman Scott, that's correct.
So this was set aside. This isn't a new item. This is what was left over from after paying January, correct? Out of the 3 months appropriations that we signed.
Through the chair to Councilman Scott, that money would have been appropriated in a temporary budget under the mayor's office.
Correct.
So it would have been part of the temporary appropriation to continue the live stream through March 31st.
Okay, so technically, I mean, people don't want anybody get blown out of proportion. This $2,400 isn't money that we're going to be paying. We're not paying February 8th through March, and it's going to come to a total of $2,400. This is just what is left over from what was appropriated for our 3-month temporary appropriations, correct?
Through the chair and the councilman. So as Mr. Vecchio pointed out, the agreement was $100 per meeting to the Reynoldses, plus there's a $200 fee for Boxcast and another $35 fee from Boxcast for storage. So $100 a meeting, roughly 6 meetings a month, $600 per month times 2 is $1,200, and $470 roughly for the expenditure to Boxcast. So that would be an expenditure of roughly $1,670. And if there are extra meetings through February and March, it would come out of that $2,400.
And if it wasn't used, it would go into the general fund.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Poindexter?
Thank you, Council President. I'm just curious, why is it $100 a meeting flat rate? I mean, shouldn't it be an hourly rate? In my opinion, I think, if the meetings are shorter, we shouldn't be paying the full $100 amount. And if they're longer, obviously, I'd like them to be compensated for their time, appropriately. I think that's something we should explore before passing this through, especially if council takes on the payment. I want to make sure that we're not overpaying. We shouldn't pay $100 for a meeting where we come, say the pledge and adjourn. That's not worth $100. So I think we should explore the possibility of, doing it with part-time employment under the same rules of any other part-time employee of the city. Thank you.
Well, let me clarify. So Brandon and Brandy are not employees of the city. They are not part-time employees. They are contractors. So therefore, it's a 1099. As a 1099 employee, they are responsible for their own taxes. The city does not pay into PERS or any of the expenses that we have for any employee. So therefore, those items are the contractor's responsibility. So initially, I believe, and Mr. Single can correct me, I believe 13% on a contractor is right off the top. So whatever that works out to, depending on what the meetings are. And if you look at it from the standpoint of 2016, 2017 meetings, I would have to agree that the $100 per meeting was warranted for the amount of time. Do I believe that this council is going to operate in that function? I would surely hope not, and I think that I don't think that the members here are going to allow that. So I believe that as Mr. Salvatore said, that maybe up for negotiation and look at this with a contract.
I mean, I think that's what I'm basically proposing, is that we maybe think about creating it and creating a part-time position for that, and treat them as part-time employees. It's a 1 day a week job, or maybe another day here or there with a special meeting. But I want to make sure that they're compensated appropriately and that we're paying the appropriate amount. That's just.
I think that I personally think that that's a worthy item, but I think I would defer over to Mr. Single to see what the cost would be on that and see if it's relative. And maybe that's something to think about between now and whenever the action's taken on this. Mr. Salvatore? you-
I'd like to make a motion we discussed.
Support.
Motion on the floor that number 5 has been discussed, properly supported. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Michelle, please call the roll.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Orcutt,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes,
Poindexter,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
Stem.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Number 6, a resolution authorizing all actions necessary to accept Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council, parentheses, NOPEC, energized community grants, and declaring an emergency, introduced by Mayor Gamella per Council President Vecchio.
Mr. Chairman.
Mayor? Mr. Salvatore?
I'd like to make a motion to place on the next council agenda.
Support.
Motion to place on the next council agenda, properly supported. Discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, Rick, would that be tonight's agenda?
No, the next council.
Okay.
February 20th.
There's no time constraints on this, right? There is?
There is.
There isn't, okay. Next
It's on-
council agenda.
You want the caucus, next caucus? You
No,
want?
just put it right to the next council agenda.
So February 20th?
Yep.
All right, so motion on the floor to put on the February 20th council agenda, properly supported. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Michelle, please call the roll.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
Poindexter,
Yes.
Stem,
Yes.
Orcutt,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes,
Motion to place on the February 20th council agenda has been approved.
Motion to adjourn.
support.
Motion to adjourn, properly supported. Discussion? Seeing none. Michelle, please call the roll.
Salvatore,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bergio,
Yes.
Orcutt,
Yes.
Stem,
Yes.
Mancini,
Yes.
Poindexter,
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned at 7:47. We will reconvene at 7:55.